Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to another If I Had Written episode. And in today's episode, we have a very unique topic that I don't think anybody's really covered, and that is the Force Unleashed 3. The cancelled or unreleased version of the Force Unleashed 3. I know that it never happened, and I really wanted to cover this topic for years. This was a storyline that I finally dusted off. It's been actually 3 years since I was going to release this particular video, so before I ended up releasing it, I kind of remastered it and packaged it up into a If I Had Written, and If I Had Written is where I write custom projects, pre-writes, rewrites, everything in between. But today's episode is very special to me as it has to do with the dark side ending in Star Wars The Force Unleashed. So I'm not too sure if you guys are familiar with the dark side DLC, but once you finish the original game, you have two options. You can choose the light or the dark. If you choose the dark path, Starkiller becomes a cybernetic monster similar to Darth Vader. But there is a continuation of DLC that has you play as Starkiller throughout the events of A New Hope and even Empire Strikes Back. But only this time, Starkiller kind of hints towards Luke Skywalker becoming his apprentice after he defeats him. So that is where the story is actually going to begin. So I would highly recommend to come back to this video if you're not familiar with what we're going to be talking about. But this particular episode is going to be If I Had Written the dark version of the storyline, a continuation of what could have been. And I honestly believe that this would have happened, maybe similar, I'm not 100% sure, but I wanted to really just go straight in depth with this storyline. I think it would have been so interesting to see Starkiller have Luke Skywalker as an apprentice. It would have been very interesting. But that being said, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, let's dive into the brand new If I Had Written episode. The fire hadn't gone out on Hoth. Not completely. Ash still blew across the snow in smoldering pockets, where the shell of an AT-AT walker laid half-melted beside the body of a rebel transport. The last screams had long since faded, but the smell lingered. Ozone, blood, and scorched cloth. Beneath the cracked sky, a lone figure moved through the ruins, dragging something behind him. It was a body, slumped, broken, missing a hand. It was Luke Skywalker, or so the galaxy believed. Darth Starkiller stood atop a frozen ridge, his armor cracked from battle, the red glow of his saber humming low by his side. He watched the last Imperial transport lift off, towards the executor above. His eyes glinted beneath the hood. Behind him, the shadows whispered. Vader's voice haunted these frozen winds. But he wasn't there, not anymore. I killed him. He said it out loud. But it was a lie. A convenient fiction, the one he told Palpatine. He hadn't killed Luke Skywalker. He had done something worse. The transport touched down on Coruscant hours later. Starkiller descended the ramp into the Emperor's private audience chamber beneath the Sith Citadel. The room was dark, always lit only by the pale green glow of a suspended kyber crystal. The walls pulsed with Sith runes, their meanings known only to Palpatine himself. The Emperor turned slowly in his obsidian throne. Is it done? Starkiller dropped a single item onto the floor. Luke's severed hand. The lightsaber still clinched into it. He died a coward, Starkiller said. Alone. Palpatine's lips curled upward, just slightly. Good. He turned away again. The rebellion is finished. You will snuff out its embers. But behind his back, Starkiller's mind churched. The boy hadn't begged. hadn't screamed, hadn't fought with fury. But not for himself, for something else. His friends, his father. Starkiller hadn't understood it then, but now he did. And he saw use in it. Luke Skywalker wasn't dead, not entirely. He was comatose when Starkiller dragged him from the ruins of Echo Base. Cybernetics had replaced his hand. The scar across his face was still fresh. His breath had returned slowly, as though his lungs were unsure whether he wanted to live. He awoke on Mustafar, not in a healing chamber, but a stone slab, deep in the molten heart of Vader's former sanctuary. Long since claimed by the dark, the lava flow outside pulsed like veins. The air was hot enough to strip paint from Durasteel. Luke opened his eyes to the sound of sabers clashing, and Starkiller stood above him. You have questions, save them. He tossed a lightsaber at Luke's chest, a deep crimson blade. You want answers? Survive me. The training was brutally disguised as purpose. Luke didn't learn, he endured. Every strike, every burn, every shattered bone was explained as necessary. Starkiller spoke of betrayal. How Palpatine had murdered Darth Vader, Luke's father, because he grew too powerful. How Obi-Wan Kenobi had abandoned him to die. How Yoda hid, letting the galaxy burn. How the rebellion sacrificed soldiers like Leia and Han for a cause that was already lost. Starkiller didn't teach control, he taught vengeance. And Luke Skywalker listened. Not because he believed it, but because he needed something to hold on to. Because in this new shattered world, pain made more sense than hope. Elsewhere in the galaxy, rumors were spreading like wildfire. Leia and Han, now fugitives, retreated into hiding after Hoth. The rebellion was fractured, leaderless, and hunted. The Emperor prepared to construct a new superweapon, the second Death Star. Not as a show of strength, but as a trap. He wanted the rebels to fight, to crawl back, so he could crush them in one blow. The name Skywalker faded, buried. Whispers of his death became a rally cry for some, and a tombstone for others. Months passed. Luke's eyes no longer burned with the blue light of hope. They were dark now, hollow, but they weren't empty. He stood with Starkiller above the Mustafarian lava, armor scarred, saber red. You've proven yourself, but the Emperor must never suspect you lived. He believes me loyal. Let him. And then Starkiller said the words, your final test. Find Yoda, kill him. Luke's breath caught. He said nothing. Starkiller continued, circling like a vulture. You already know where he is. He lied to you, just like Kenobi did. They all did. Finish him, and we'll kill the Emperor together. Luke left Mustafar that night in silence. The red blade clipped to his belt. Yoda's lightsaber in Starkiller's chamber, a reminder. But somewhere deep in the folds of hyperspace, as the X-Wing passed through the star lanes towards Dagobah, Luke whispered to himself, what if he didn't lie? What if I was just wrong? The stars blurred, and the path to Dagobah opened like an old wound. The air was heavier on Dagobah than Luke remembered. It wasn't just the humidity, though. The mist clung to his back like a cloak, like wet cloth. Though every breath dragged through his lungs like swamp water, it was the feeling that the planet itself remembered who he was and what he had become. Luke stepped from the cockpit of his X-Wing, boots sinking into the mud. He had landed precisely where he had years ago, beside the trees and tangled roots that he had once welcomed him as a boy seeking truth. But that boy was now gone, and in his place stood a man with a red lightsaber, at his belt, in a storm within his mind. The walk to Yoda's hut felt longer this time, not in distance but in weight. The trees whispered things, they had no voice to speak. Shadows moved not from the light but from memory. Luke saw flashes as he walked, visions in the mist, Leia crying, Ben dying, Vader's hand reaching for him. He didn't flinch at them. He was used to ghosts. Yoda's hut was still there, though smaller, older, cracked, at the dome like a broken shell. And in its doorway stood the master himself. He was seated, cane resting across his knees, his face more wrinkled than ever before. His eyes were dim but not dulled. They focused sharply on Luke the moment he appeared from the fog. Yoda didn't speak. Not right away. Luke stood silently before him. "Come to kill me, have you?" Yoda finally said, voice raspy. "A Sith you are now." Luke didn't respond. His hand hovered near his saber. "Or confused you are." Luke finally broke the silence. "They all lied to me. You, Kenobi, my father, if he was even my father. Starkiller showed me. Deceived he has," Yoda said faintly. "Truth bent to hate. A blade twisted in your mind." Luke stepped forward, eyes burning. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you stop this? You let it all happen." Yoda didn't defend himself. He only lowered his head. "Because choices, yours was, and still is." Lightning cracked across the sky, and in the next flash, two more figures appeared, shimmering in blue, shaped in memory and presence. Obi-Wan Kenobi, and beside him, Anakin Skywalker. Luke recoiled. No. Obi-Wan stepped forward. His robes drifted like smoke. His face was tired but resolute. "Luke, we failed you, but that doesn't mean you have to fail yourself." "You told me my father was dead," Luke spat. "You let me believe Vader was nothing but a monster." "Because he was," Obi-Wan said, eyes narrowing. "Until the very end, Anakin Skywalker was lost inside of a prison of rage, just like you are now." Luke turned to Anakin. "And you just watched? Let Palpatine twist everything?" Anakin's expression was one Luke had never seen on him. Sorrow. "I let fear rule me, and then anger, and then there was nothing left but a mask." He stepped forward slowly. His voice was low. "You're walking the same path, but you don't have to finish it." "You don't understand," Luke growled. "I have to see it through." Starkiller said. Anakin raised his hand. "Starkiller is like me, without chains. What I could have been, worse. He wants you angry. He wants you loyal, not to help you, but to use you. You're not his apprentice, you're his weapon." Luke turned away. His breaths were shallow now. The saber at his belt trembled. Yoda stood now, leaning on his cane. "Clouded your mind has become. Still see you do not. Through this shadow the light shines." Lightning again, the ghosts faded slightly. "I came here to kill you," Luke whispered. "I know," Yoda replied, "and I still don't know if I should." Silence. Then his father spoke. "If you do this, your friends die. Leia, Han, Chewbacca, all of them. You'll have power, but you'll be alone forever." Luke didn't answer. He just fell to his knees. The saber hit the ground. He screamed. Not in rage, not in pain, but in grief. For the man he might have been, for the friends he left behind, for the galaxy that no longer felt like his. The next morning, the X-Wing lifted off. Inside, Luke sat in silence. On the seat beside him, Yoda's lightsaber. Not as a trophy, but as a message. Back on Mustafar, Starkiller waited in the Chamber of Ash. He looked up as Luke entered into the chamber. No words were exchanged. Luke knelt, presented the saber. It's done. Starkiller grinned. Then you're ready. He turned to a holomap. The Emperor has moved his throne to a new station, Death Star 2, over Endor. We strike together, and nothing will stop us. Luke said nothing, but the ghosts were still with him, watching, waiting. The second Death Star hung above the forest moon like a half-built crown, jagged, vast, and pregnant with death. Its incomplete structure resembled a wounded predator, and yet beneath its armor, the Emperor sat undisturbed, watching, waiting. Deep in the towered throne chamber, silent, but for the electric hum of machines, Darth Starkiller and Luke Skywalker emerged from the shadowed corridor, both clad in black, both calm, both hiding a secret. Starkiller walked as a conqueror. Luke walked as a survivor. The Emperor did not rise when they approached. He merely turned his chair. The flickering energy of the galaxy glinted off his yellow eyes. Ah, young Skywalker. Not so young anymore. Luke bowed low. Palpatine's smile curled like rot. You have come far. Your father would be proud. He turned to Starkiller. You have done well, my apprentice. But the galaxy always hungers for strength. Palpatine rose slowly from the throne. Perhaps it's time for a new. The air shifted. Luke tensed. This was the plan, but never said which of us he'd betray first. The silence was broken by a snap hiss. A crimson saber ignited in Starkiller's hand. He used you, Starkiller said. Gaze still locked on Palpatine. He used us all, but no more. Luke's saber ignited beside him, crimson. Palpatine laughed and explained that Starkiller was a traitor, in a low, cold voice. How predictable. And then everything erupted. The chamber became a furnace of rage. Palpatine moved with unnatural speed, his hand with raw, violent lightning, blasting both attackers back across the marble floor. The air screamed. The structure groaned under the weight of force energy, colliding in the arcs and tremors. Starkiller and Luke attacked in tandem, blades whirling, leaping across the raised platforms, crashing down in spirals of red. But Palpatine was stronger than either imagined. He caught Luke mid-air with a burst of force crush, slamming him into a pillar. Starkiller lunged, but was intercepted by a barrage of lightning that burned through his armor and drove him to one knee. Fools, Palpatine snarled. Do you think I didn't see this coming? I crafted you, Starkiller. I carved you from a failure and rage. You are not a Sith. You are a shadow. And you, he said, turning to Luke, are nothing but a boy wearing your father's sins. But Luke wasn't down. He rose slowly, the side of his face scorched, his eyes burning, not with hate, with clarity. You're wrong. I'm not my father. I'm not your pawn. He glanced at Starkiller, who gritted his teeth, rising too. Their plan had failed, but their choice remained. Together, they charged. The second wave of a duel was vicious. 3 titans locked in a dance of destruction. Starkiller's attacks were fueled by years of pain, each strike fueled by desperation. Luke's style had changed, more controlled now, calculated. He wasn't fighting like a Sith, not anymore. And for a moment, they had him. Starkiller's blade carved deep into Palpatine's sleeve. Luke forced him back with a blast of repulsing force energy. And then it all turned. Palpatine unleashed a final explosive wave of Force lightning, centered directly onto Starkiller. The blast struck him full in his chest. He screamed, convulsed, and was thrown like a rag doll into the center of the chamber. His lightsaber flew from his hand, spinning across the floor. Smoke rose from his armor. He wasn't moving. Palpatine stepped forward, cloak tattered, breathing heavily but victorious. "You were always disposable." He turned to Luke, hands cracking. "Now, my true heir." Luke dropped to one knee, head bowed, silent. "Yes, that's it," Palpatine whispered. He stepped closer. Luke's hand opened. Starkiller's lightsaber slid across the floor into his palm. The red blade ignited. Luke looked up, his eyes full of fire. "You taught me the dark side was strength, but I learned something better." He lunged and drove the saber straight through Starkiller's heart. Silence. Palpatine froze. Starkiller's eyes went wide. He looked up at Luke, not in anger, but in understanding. "Good," he whispered, with his last breath, then collapsed. Palpatine laughed. "You disappoint me again. He was loyal. You are weak." Luke stood. "No, I'm free." Palpatine raised his hands. The lightning surged. Luke stepped forward into it. His body shook. His skin blistered. But he kept walking. With every step, he drew on pain. Not for vengeance, not for power, but for balance. He dropped to one knee as Palpatine cackled, raising his saber with the Force, and then Luke drove the red blade into the Emperor's chest. Lightning surged. Palpatine screamed. The throne chamber shook, and with one final thing of rage, the Sith Lord exploded into a blinding flash. The Death Star shook. Sirens wailed. Luke dragged himself from the collapsing chamber, charred and bleeding. He passed Starkiller's body on the floor, paused. For the first time, Luke looked at him with pity. He knelt. "You weren't my master, but you taught me one lesson. The dark is never loyal." He closed Starkiller's eyes and left. A stolen shuttle escaped just before the Death Star's core imploded. Inside, Luke sat quietly, waiting. He landed on the forest moon of Endor hours later. Leia was there, Han too. They didn't recognize him at first. Bruised, burned, dressed in shadow. But his eyes, they were Luke's eyes. He stepped forward and Leia hugged him. No words, just tears. Night fell on Endor. Luke stood alone on a cliff overlooking the trees. In his hands, two sabers, his red one and his father's. He ignited them both, then turned off the red and let it fall. He buried it into the earth and walked back towards the firelight. And that is going to be if I had written Star Wars The Force Unleashed 3, The Evil Path. Now, what did you think of this video with Luke Skywalker being able to overcome the dark side and not be a slave to the Emperor or to Starkiller? It does make a very sad ending for Starkiller's character, as I written him off kind of like how he had killed Vader in the Evil Path. So I personally believe that, you know, at that point, Starkiller was a pawn. There really was no redemption arc for Starkiller. And I personally think that Luke Skywalker having a different path in Empire Strikes Back, especially with Vader not being there, but having this other figure, it really makes you ponder the question, like, what would have happened? And I honestly tried to write this story the best of my ability, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. But that being said, if you guys do enjoy the content on this YouTube channel, I would highly recommend becoming a Patreon member or even joining the YouTube community, as you can get a ton of behind the scenes content. And we're always doing a ton of behind the scenes stuff on Patreon, on YouTube, so it's very interesting. And we have brand new emotes on YouTube, so that's also another thing. And also, I would highly recommend to check out some of the live streams that we're going to be doing on this YouTube channel, as well as the Twitch. So if you guys aren't following MissedThePart on Twitch, I would highly recommend that you guys do that, as we're going to be doing like live writes. We're going to be taking your requests live and writing them down into a list, and we've already done over 40 different stories that are going to be coming on the channel, and we plan on giving community shoutouts for those who made these awesome suggestions. So if you think that, you know, you want to be a part of the community, again, I would highly recommend click that big red subscribe button. The support really goes a long way, and to the bottom of my heart, I really can't thank you guys enough. Thank you so very much for the fantastic requests, for everything. The support really does mean a lot to me, especially over these last few days with some of the live streams that we have been doing. We're getting a ton of Star Wars fan fiction requests, as well as even more different franchises. So whatever you guys want to see, let me know in the comments down below. But that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful day. Peace out.